tradition you continue. And tell me the story when you went to, on May 1999, when you went to World Series Poker Tournament in Las Vegas.
I became, over the years, we played poker in our fraternities in Penn State. I went to Penn State University as pre-med. Then I went to the Osteopathic College in Philadelphia. We had a professional medical, and we played cards there and poker. But I never knew anything about a poker tournament. And I finally entered one at Foxwood Casino in 1993 and ended up winning it. And that started me on becoming a tournament poker player, not a live action poker player. And so in 1999, I had already been to Las Vegas on previous occasions, and at this time in 99, I was going to play in the World Series of Poker Tournament. And while I was there, I got knocked out the one day. It was a different tournament every day, and I got knocked out during the tournament I was in, and I went back to my hotel room, and watching television that night, was experiencing the news about the massacres by the Serbians on the Kosovars in Kosovo. I had never heard of Kosovo before that I know of, knew almost nothing of Albania. I'm not Albanian by descent or bloodlines, and I became very almost immediately dedicated that, having been retired medically for 2 years, that's what I wanted to do, that there was a better place for me for doing the work that I love to do, and that was doctoring and surgery. So the next day I called Doctors Without Borders to see if they would like to have me sign up, and they said they would, and they said then it would take 3 months to process my application, and I said no, I wanted to go to Kosovo and Albania now, as soon as I could. So I got the number of the International Medical Corps from LA, called them, and they were very helpful, and 2 days later I left Vegas, and they sent me an application on Tuesday. That was Monday I left Vegas. Tuesday I got the application, filled it out, sent it back Wednesday. I left JFK Airport on Thursday. I was in Albania on Friday, and my first of 5-day refugee camps on the following day on Saturday. So that's how I got there.
So you arrived to Tirana, was a smell of war, I would call it.
Yes.
Because in Tirana you could feel also, you could see a lot of soldiers moving around there.
I came out of the airport and there was a soldier with a machine gun. I have a picture here you can see shortly of that.
We'll watch all the pictures that you want us to show it.
Fine.
So first you went there in Tirana, and you were not alone, were you?
I was alone.
You were alone?
Yes.
Without speaking Albanian?
No, never.
Oh, were you sure that they would speak English?
I didn't know. Didn't even worry about it.
Instinct.
I don't worry about things like that.
So after you went there, you asked for the hospital of Tirana?
I waited, and I was picked up by, no, I didn't go to the hospital. I was picked up and went to the headquarters of the International Medical Corps, who then sent me to where I was going to stay in some small two-room with, I think, 3 other medical personnel. They weren't doctors, but they were employees one way or another. I can't tell you just who they were now because I was only with them for a couple of days.
Were they foreigners also?
They weren't Americans. I think there were 1 or 2 were English, maybe. And I don't recollect, that's 15 years ago. But it was in Tirana, and it was just a small apartment, and there was just a couple small rooms, and 2 or 3 of us bunked in the same room. And the one thing I do remember about it is that they had a whole collection there in a box of brand new surgical instruments and medical instruments, all beautiful equipment. And my big thought was then, why is that there? Why isn't it out being used somewhere, in the wartime? And that can go on to a later story as to when I finally left Kukës, Albania, to come home after 6 weeks of medical equipment that I dispersed, which I was not supposed to do to the hospital people. But that's another story.
Okay, let's start again in Tirana. So you stayed there about 4 or 5 days, right?
I was there till the following. I was there 1 week. I got there on a Friday and left the following Thursday.
And from there you decided to go to Kukës. Didn't you know that there was a war area, war zone?
Well, that's why I went.
You want to see the reality.
Well, that's why I went originally, to go to Kosovo and Albania because of the war and to take care of wartime KLA soldiers.
How did you go there, Joe?
To where?
To Kukës.
From Tirana?
Yes.
No, I was taken, I think, like in maybe a Land Rover with 3 or 4 others. There was an Englishman, a Scotsman, and an Australian with me. And I was in the back. I can remember it like yesterday. And they were all talking with their accents, and I was having a hard time understanding them.
English, but not English.
English, but not English, my English. And finally, I'm sitting in the passenger seat up front, and finally I turn around and I started this. I'll repeat what I said. Kannst du Mikrofon du bist eine Begeber? And they all looked at me like, what do you say? What do you say? I said, well, when you start talking English that I can understand, I'll tell you what I'm saying. That's exactly how that went.
So you mixed that with German?
I did. I mixed the German. I could have thrown in a little como sta instead. I probably did, which was Spanish, or a little tikanis, which is Greek. They got the message, and we all laughed. We all laughed big time.
They were doctors too?
No, they weren't doctors. I was the only doctor.
So you went in Kukës, in hospital?
Yes.
It was on the border, close to the border.
It's like, what, 6 miles, 7 miles?
Your experience for the first time?
Well, when I was in Tirana, the manager of the International Medical Corps, whose name was Kate, she came to me after I'd been in the refugee camps for the first 5 days, asked me if I'd like to go to Kukës as a surgeon because of where the fighting was. I said, yes, I did. That's why I came. And she had told me that before I go, she better tell me of what happened up there a couple of days earlier. And she said that the headlines of the Kukës newspaper was, quote, Kukës Hospital Death Camp for Refugees. And there was an article written by an Australian young surgeon who had been there, as well as an American anesthesiologist, as I understand.
Greg Juricic, something like Greg, right?
Pardon?
Greg Juricic?
I don't know name, because I didn't know him. He was already gone by the time I got there. But they had written an article which was extremely derogatory to the hospital in Kukës. And my being of the same organization, the manager in Tirana thought I might get up there and have a problem because of what previous colleagues had written this article about how bad Kukës Hospital was. And so I said, no, I'm going. And so I didn't know quite what to expect, but I wasn't worried about it. I was confident in my own mind that I would be able to get into the hospital and do what I came to do. So the next day after I arrived in Kukës, we went to the hospital and there was a commotion going on in what they call their emergency room, which was just a one room with a litter in it. And a young boy about 7 or 8 had a grenade go off in his hands and had blown off his right hand and had shrapnel injuries and blinded him and so forth. And I had just walked into it. The hospital was crowded with family and onlookers, and the Albanian doctors were there, and Dr. Shahir Shehu was the orthopedic surgeon there with Kukës Hospital that was attending the boy. And he had taken him to the operating room. And when I found out that that's where they went, I ran up and introduced myself the best I could in English to Dr. Shehu, who didn't speak any English. as he was getting ready to put on his surgical outfit and go in and take care of the little boy. So I did get across to him that I was a surgeon, would be happy to help him, and he invited me to be his assistant, which I did. So he revised the stump and absent right hand at the wrist, and I would remove shrapnel from the boy's chest and lacerations of the face and chest. And then he wanted me to, was going to amputate the thumb and first of the left hand, and I let him know that I didn't feel that he should do that, and he asked me to go ahead and repair it, which I did, figuring that he had already lost his right hand, and if we could save those fingers on his left hand, that would be good. If the fingers deteriorated, they always could be amputated in 2, 3, 4 days, but at least we'd give him a chance. And so I repaired the left hand and injuries, and he had enough blood supply that he healed the wound, and we were able to save that hand. So I think it was the next day or the following weekend, I'd have to check my records, 3 or 4 KLA wounded soldiers were brought in. The chief general surgeon from Tirana was in Kukësit that weekend when those soldiers were brought in. I remember one was shot in the head and was dead on arrival. One was shot in the chest. One was shot in the right lower abdomen. And Dr. From Tirana was working on the one with the abdominal wound. I put a chest tube in the chest wound and was treating that soldier. We then went to the operating room, and I assisted the general surgeon from Tirana, and we did a removal of the whole right colon from the bullet wound and did a reanastomosis of the intestinal tract after the part we removed, and that soldier survived. And that was my introduction to the hospital. And I do think that under the circumstances of what had happened before with the newspaper article, if those 2 incidents hadn't happened, I may not have been allowed into that hospital to treat anybody because I was of the same organization. And at that time, no foreign doctors were allowed to do anything. Only the Albanian doctors that were there already working in the hospital. It was a matter of pride and respect of their hospital, and they took a big offense at that newspaper article, and rightly so, because I did not find that to be the case while I was there for 6 weeks. I found the doctors to be very dedicated, and Dr. Ilber Vada and a young 32-year-old surgeon, and Shahir Shehu especially, they were very fine, dedicated Albanian doctors. And so they did not live up to the bad reports at all, to what was said in the newspaper articles by those other 2 doctors who were no longer there. And from what I had heard, they were no longer wanted around either, and that's obvious and to easily understand.
So, in your experience, you saw many soldiers also who were wounded. And did it happen to see anybody dying there?
Oh, yes. Well, I said the first day I was there, one soldier already was dead in the ER that had been shot in the head. And following that, we had soldiers brought in with mine injuries and bullet wounds and shrapnel wounds. And I have pictures of almost every one that I took care of while I was in the hospital service for those 5 weeks.
Can you show us some pictures of?
Oh, yeah. Definitely, I got them. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, thank you.
Sure.
As you saw the video, what happened in Kosovo during the war, also you saw soldiers wounded. You saw also many children coming and going in Kukësit. So you see, like everybody was distressed, in trauma from the war, because most of the terror has been done against the civilians in Kosovo, what Serbian forces did. So, doctor, you had many soldiers in your hand.
Yes.
And you told me earlier that some of them like 2 or 3 of them you remember were when they died there. So most of them amputated legs, as we will show now also some pictures, and hands, and badly wounded.
That's
so
true.
How do you remember that?
You must remember that the soldiers that I was able to take care of were brought from where they had been in the fight and wounded to a hospital in which I would call a safe haven in northern Albania, Kukësit. So I feel that, yes, I was very happy in being able to do what I did, but I felt that when I went there, I would probably have been more assigned to more of a front line area, because I feel that I could have taken care of a lot more wounded KLA soldiers that were brought wounded and at the site of the battle. And where I was, it was a protected safe haven hospital, okay, where the soldiers were brought to, probably within a 20-mile radius or site from where they had been wounded, most of them. So that I feel I could have even handled a lot more soldiers. I would like to have done that. But the soldiers that were brought to the hospital, we did take care of. They were mostly mine injuries. Some of them even after the armistice was signed on June 8th of '99. But there were bullet wounds and shrapnels and from the explosions and that kind of thing. Okay.
We'll show some pictures during this conversation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
While you were helping KLA soldiers badly wounded on that time.
Yes, true. Mm-hmm.
And how horrific was on that time during the war, because it was a hard time to come to Kukësit also from the war zone. It was really tough.
Yes.
You had to cross the border where also heavy fighting were going on. So we'll show some pictures during this conversation.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
While you were helping KLA soldiers badly wounded on that time.
Yes, true. Mm-hmm.
And how horrific was on that time during the war, because it was a hard time to come to Kukësit also from the war zone. It was really tough.
Yes.
You had to cross the border where also heavy fighting were going on. So
and that's what I did.
Seeing all these soldiers, what they have been going through, and coming in your hands wounded.
Yes.
Some of them survived, luckily. Do you think that they deserve respect nowadays from Albanian people, at least?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Not only do they respect, in my mind, the respect of the Albanian people, but I expect that the Kosovars will give great respect to the Albanians who received so many refugees and took care of them in their small apartments and housing. And I remember seeing apartments in Albania with 18 people in one small apartment where they brought in and housed the Kosovars. So I'm sure there was a mutual respect from Albanians to Kosovars as well as from Kosovars to Albanians, and that's what I like.
When I say Albanians, I say for Kosovars too, because we consider Albanians
93% Albanian. Yes, all right.
Yes, so that's why they.
I'm sorry, I kind of misinterpreted a little bit there.
They deserve a respect from Albanians wherever they are.
Yeah, absolutely, no question.
During the war, you saw many children. Because what Serbs did, they did two things. Violating ladies. We have about 20,000 Albanian women who have been raped during the war. And also we have few thousand children being killed or at least being badly wounded. So you had that experience seeing children coming in your hands.
Yes, I did. I treated them.
So we will show some pictures how you treated them.
Yes.
So what do you remember from that time?
That was treating children, wounded children, whether it's accidents or whether it's related to wartime injuries, such as mine injuries, and shrapnel and that kind of thing. Very difficult, very difficult. Very emotional, and some of my most difficult memories are with the children that experience the product of what war is all about and what happens to them. And they will live forever in their memory what they've gone through, whether they were 3 years old or 6 years old or 10 years old. That's not going to go away. They're going to remember that the rest of their life. So their wound is one you can't see. They keep that inside, but it's there. It's always going to be there, you know. So with soldiers, a soldier's a soldier. He's going to go to battle, and he's either going to come out alive, wounded, or not alive. And we have to deal with that situation and try to maintain our emotional stability while we're taking care of those people. And that's what most of the military doctors try to do. But we still get into that post-traumatic syndrome from, we're seeing it now with a lot of our soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan here in this country. With suicide rates high in our returning soldiers and that are still in the military. And the ravages of war are terrible. Any way you want to look at it, whether they're physical wounds or mental wounds for the experiences they go through.
Doctor, your profession has been for a long time experiencing in different hospitals, doing different surgeries.
Yes.
And also in Kukësit and Tirana, you saw the reality of the hospitals during the war. So what I want to ask you, something it's very important for us to know from you as an American doctor who went during the war in Kukësit, and you saw KLA soldiers, you saw also civilians being wounded there. What do you think about the accusations now against the Kosovo Liberation Army that during the war, Kosovo Liberation Army had so-called doctors that did get the Serbian hostages, civilians, and took their organs and sold? Is that something that would kind of fit into reality, what you saw with your eyes?
Well, as of today, this is the first time that I have ever heard one word regarding what you've questioned me about. I find it almost totally unbelievable at that time or at this time in that same locality under the same circumstances that anything like that is even possible. I participated in taking organs from people who had already signed to donate their organs at the time of their death during my surgical training in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And the process that takes place in the proper removal of the organ, the proper preparation of the organ, in the cooling and freezing part of the organ, and the transport time to get from where you take the organ to get to where it's going, it's unbelievable to me that that could possibly ever have taken place in that locality from what you're telling me in Albania by the KLA soldiers. First of all, I don't know of any other doctors other than one or two that were even involved in the Albanian-Kosovo conflict other than where I was in the war zone area. And it's inconceivable that if there was a doctor there with what the war was going on, how anyone would be able to have the time and energy to be able, and politically, in a wartime, to be able to even start to get away with what you're telling me. It's unbelievable. I don't believe that.
So
it's my belief. I don't believe that that happened.
So what I'm telling you is what we are seeing now in the news, and we are reading every day the report of Dick Marty, a report of Carlo Del Ponte, also was a prosecutor who didn't agree with this report finally after 3 years or 4 years of investigation, Mr. Williamson, he's an American, because KLA is being accused that they did human trafficking and human organs trafficking, so-called, during the war. And it has been said that they had special clinics in Albania where you, as a doctor during the war, you saw the reality. Would KLA have any clinic in Albania during that time? Was it possible? We know they didn't have in the war, but also in Albania was impossible, right?
Are you asking me, is it possible that the KLA had a clinic in Albania, not Kosovo, okay, during the war?
Yes.
To take organs and sell them for transplants?
Yes.
Is that what you're asking me?
Yes.
I find that highly unbelievable. This, as I said, this is the first time I've ever even heard this mentioned from what you're telling me. I had no knowledge of that and still have no knowledge other than the story that you're telling me about the accusations that have been made, okay? But again, as I said previously, it's almost inconceivable to me, okay? Now, whether or not somebody was out there that did some of that work under cover of something unknown to a KLA organization, I know the KLA people. I dealt with them, the soldiers. I know what they were fighting for. They weren't fighting for money. They were fighting for their homeland and their independence and the massacres that were going on by the Serbians and so forth. They weren't out there looking to find how to make a dollar. And whether there were some rogues, which are rogues in anywhere, whether there were or not, I don't know. But I don't believe that if they were doing what you said and you're accused of somebody doing, that the organs, whatever they did take, if they did do this, never were received by anybody because of the time factors and the expertise in doing that kind of work. I don't think that it's possible.
So it's impossible to happen then?
I say it seems very improbable. Whether it's impossible, I can't answer that one. But it's improbable in my experience that I would say no. Since I know the techniques of doing this and participating in that, I don't see how that is possible.
Well, it looks like it's more politically motivated from Serbs and being...
I don't know where it's coming from, but as far as what you've told me, I say I don't believe it myself. Okay, I'd have to be shown direct, factual evidence, pictures of the process, of the transactions, okay, before I'd ever even contemplate thinking that this was achievable.
It is strange, and it's hard to even dream on it, but I wanted to ask you, as a doctor who served during the war in Kosovo, and you know the reality, so if something would happen, you would see it. And you are an American, you wouldn't be scared from anybody, you would tell the truth. So that's why I asked you, and really I thank you for telling this, because we needed somebody who has been in the field, has been in that during that war in the border in Albania, and to understand from you that these accusations are mostly politically motivated from Serbs and paying some other people to just serve on their interests. And this is against humanity, because I see some pictures, especially children, that you treated them, which is very sad what happened during the war in Kosovo, and we want to thank you on behalf of Albanian American Vision, what you did for Kosovo and how many lives you saved there. They are happy now, they are in freedom, but we are pretty sure they will never forget you, even if they didn't have a chance to contact you. So I see many soldiers amputated legs that happened during that time, so you have a lot of experience. So if we would have clinics during the war, it wouldn't come to Kukës anybody. So that's what happened there. You keeping t-shirt that you went with this t-shirt in Albania for the first time?
I wore it, yes. Yeah.
USA with American flag.
Yep.
You went, you didn't know that much about Albania. I saw that you had a map of Albania and you were looking at it because you didn't know that much of Albania. So
True.
you went there. What did you find on that people? Did they love Americans or not?
Yes. Not knowing what to expect when I got there in a foreign country of any kind. I know that the United States has good relations with this country and not so good relations with another country. So I didn't give it a whole lot of thought, to be honest with you, okay? I just went to try to do what I wanted to do. But I was just overwhelmed by the people and how nice they were and how friendly they were and how much they appreciated what England and the United States were doing as far as the bombing raids and helping, defeat the Serbs in Belgrade. I didn't know the Serbians. I'm sure there are some great Serbian people. But so many times it just comes down to administrations and history and everything involved, and religion as to who gets along with who and who wants what and so forth. But I'm not involved in all that. I don't get into the politics of this. Although I must say I certainly was for Kosovar independence after getting there and understanding what the history was and what was going on and the massacres that occurred and the fighting and the self-sacrifice that the Kosovar Albanians made, the families and the kids and the Albanian people in Albania themselves, and then NATO and so forth. And so I was all for, and still am, the independence of Kosovo. And I attended Mr. Rugova's first pre-election meeting in prison and was there when he came in and met him for a short time, and was happy then thereafter when his government was able to, through the United Nations, achieve Kosovar independence.
Mm-hmm. So was a United Nations administration there in Kosovo for many years until the independence arrived in Kosovo. Right after the war, the KLA soldiers, some of them wounded, some of them had to flee the country because they had to work somewhere and rebuild their houses and recuperate from their loss. Some of them had to go to jail, to serve many years in jail just because they were freedom fighters for their country, and the Serbs didn't like it though. So, and
in the areas controlled by the Serbs?
No, all over in Kosovo. So, and then some of them went very compromised with the United Nations administration, and they went into politics and they got good positions there. So they somehow, each one of them found a way to deal with it, with the situation. Even if Kosovo needed a lot of help, they didn't think about that.
Are you talking United Nations?
No, about the Kosovo politicians.
Oh, the politicians.
Ex-KLA and everybody. So, but then you found a way as a doctor, as an American doctor who served during the war there, and you knew the reality. You didn't stop the war. You were fighting still to save some lives there. Mm. So we heard about the project that you had to gather medicine and equipment from United States and bring to Kosovo and Albania.
Yes, that's true.
Would you be able to explain us a little bit on that project, because it's very thoughtful project after the war that somebody could think of it?
Well, I thought of it during the war while I was there, when I saw how little in the way of medical equipment and medical accessories, bandages and medications and crutches, wheelchairs, all of that, which were certainly needed, and they didn't have it. So even before I got home, I knew that I would, when I got back, would be in the process of trying to raise and collect medical equipment. So I eventually went back 3 more times in 2000 2000, 2001, and 2005, plus sent 2 40-foot containers of medical equipment to Kukësit hospital, and some went to the hospital in Tirana, and some went to Pristina. I collected all of that myself with the aid of some friends to help me now and then in a van. I had over seven rental storage units in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I collected medical equipment from hospitals in Scranton and Allentown, Pennsylvania. It was donated from private people, and I had one woman named Eleanor Buchanan, who was local here, lived in the country. Husband had died. She was in her early 70s, and she raised probably more than any one person or entity in equipment for me involving clothing, wheelchairs, crutches, canes, just you name it, and she had it. In fact, I surprised her with a special plaque made for her, and she died about 1 year ago, and she was from Storuca, Pennsylvania.
In 2000...
Just showed me what one person can do. One person.
Without being in Kosovo, without knowing where Kosovo is?
No, nothing. All she knew me. She used to be a patient of mine when I was here in the rural practice, and I think that she read about what I was doing and wanted to get involved and help out. And she did. And I would go, and my daughter often went with me, and either we'd go into Storuca, which is a little village about 3 miles from here, and meet her, or we'd go to her home on a dirt road in the woods, in the boondocks, and just fill up our whole van that she would have collected and had it all on her front porch. It was unbelievable. I'll never forget her.
May she rest in peace.
Yes, I'm sure she will.
She would always be remembered for her good deeds.
Yep.
People from Kukësit didn't forget you. To show their appreciation, they also gave you honored you as a citizen of Kukësit.
That's true. I got a call from Ahmed Zeda, who has resided since 1980s in this country and is an American citizen, and he is from Montenegro and has a restaurant in Bensalem, Pennsylvania, and that he and his friend Astrid, first name, came back from Albania, and they had a surprise for me. Well, I was here in northern Pennsylvania, and they were in Philadelphia. And I said, well, you can't drive all the way up here. I'll meet you in Clark Summit, which is an hour south of here. And so when I met them at a parking lot in a restaurant, here they presented me with the documents giving me the honor of a citizen of Kukësit, Albania, which I was totally surprised. I never ever dreamed that something like that would happen. I wasn't after that honor. I appreciate it, and always will. And I carry my Albanian flag on my house, my cottage.
That's a great thing. We really appreciate when we see that, because somebody who helped us so much is still thinking about our nation.
Yeah, if in this folder right here, you would find, if you went through it, all the newspaper articles that came out that I saw following 2005 on up through what Kosovo was going on, what was happening, and the evolution and involvement of the independence fight. So what was happening there, which was good and what was bad, and who was pushing what, it's all there in my folder. It was best that anything I ever ran across. So the one thing I do feel bad about is when someone will ask me about, they heard that I did something and went somewhere during the war. When I talk about the Kosovo War now, there are many people that don't even remember the Kosovo War, or they never heard of the Kosovo War. And I think that there should be something more written in English about the Kosovo War. Now, that is a job that should be done by somebody. And it's not going to be me, because I'm too old now. and I have too many other things people want me to write a book about. But it's something that I think that what happened in Kosovo should not be forgotten. I think that it should be brought out and put the books together that have already, and literatures relating to that war, put together in English so that people can look at that as what happened in World War I. I'm a very big history buff. World War I, the War of 1812 in the United States, you know, the Revolutionary War, World War II, Vietnam, Kosovo, you know. I don't want that Kosovo War forgotten for what happened to the people. It's what happened to the people. That's what can happen to the people by other people. That's what's so bad. It's happening here today. It's happening right now in the Mideast, okay, beheadings. Unbelievable. One person will do that to another person for whatever reason, you know?
So if you forget the past, definitely it will get repeated in the future.
It cycles, doesn't it? What goes around, comes around.
Thank
That's what they say.
you for your time. Did you have to say anything else?
Albanian
people to Kosovo's people?
I love the Albanian people. I really do. You know, when I came back from Albania, my number one thought was I'd like to take my own family and children and nephews and nieces over and have them spend 2 weeks in northern Albania and see what kids can do and are expected to do. At 5 years old, this little boy was running the little store outside the gates of Kukësit Hospital while his father was off milking a cow or something, you know? And what they were able to deal with, they didn't have all the TV, all the special things that our children have and expect every day.